All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. My name is Stone Shields. Here we are. We are live from home here on a Monday, not going out into the elements. Here to drive out to Hampton. I got my guy, Casey McAllister, helping us out from his house. He got us live here on the channel, but we had to hop on here regardless of the weather to talk about these championship games because they were absolutely unbelievable. Maybe not as high octane and entertaining on that first one there in the AFC side, but certainly a go either way game. The Denver Broncos end up losing 10-7 to the New England Patriots. How about it? The New England Patriots are back in the Super Bowl. They went belly up the past 2 years, a couple of 4-13 seasons, and next thing we know, they're back in the Super Bowl. Pretty hard to believe there as it relates to that. And also the NFC Championship game, which we were talking about, an absolute banger between the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. Sam Darnold silencing a lot of doubters with his performance there in that game. I thought Matthew Stafford, too, was absolutely terrific in that football game. And also some Bengals-related news. We have some AFC North stuff that we got to talk about. Pittsburgh Steelers have made the decision to hire Mike McCarthy, 62-year-old Mike McCarthy at that, which some people are a little bit surprised about. But now as you look at the scope of this division, Browns, Ravens, Bengals, and Steelers, of course, Harbaugh, Tomlin, Stefanski out, three really, really good coaches. And now it's Minter, McCarthy, and then who knows what is going on in Cleveland because that's just an absolute mess here at this point. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about that Cleveland Browns mess a little bit as well on today's show. They've had three guys that have removed their name from being a head coach candidate for them, which is pretty hard to believe. It shows you just how much of a joke really that organization is. Now that job just really doesn't have much value here at this point. But appreciate everyone hanging out. We'll give a few shout outs here as some people begin to file in. Usual suspects are here with us in the chat. Mouse Cop is here. Taston Bailey is here as well. Alex Wallace, we certainly appreciate all of his support there. No, I did not drive into Hampton. As you can see, I am at home for a little at-home edition of the Stone Shield Show. No Reed Mouse. He is out today. We're looking to get back to normal tomorrow, be back in the studio tomorrow. Hopefully Reed can make his return here to Off the Bench. Obviously, he's got a baby on the way as well. So at some points, he won't have consistent appearances on Off the Bench, but we're hoping to get a few more shows out of Reed before ultimately his wife has a baby, which is pretty exciting stuff for him. Who else we got here? Casey, of course, is in the chat. Purcell Gaines there as well. Alex Wallace, as I mentioned. Parker Jansen is here additionally there as well. So we appreciate everybody making some time for us here at the show, stopping by on a Monday. A little unique setup here. I haven't really done this here from home. So we got the microphone. I won't tell you if we're actually using it or not, but we got the camera fired up. Casey's helping us out from his place. And here we are. We're live here on Chatterbox Sports. So appreciate each and every one of you. Hit that thumbs up icon, like the stream. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, certainly there as well, as we're on our way to 22,000 subscribers here at the channel, which is pretty exciting. And hopefully we can hit that mark within the next week. Certainly would be incredible if we could do that before February. I know it's a bit of a tall task, but help us out, subscribe. We're here every single day. Kind of a dead period right now. We understand that, but there's still lots to talk about. Pitchers and catchers report here in a couple of weeks. We're going to get Freddie Benavides on the show, hopefully this week. Reds bench coach. Looking forward to that conversation with him. Caleb No, also of Local 12, is going to be making an appearance on the show here at some point this week. So we got some guests lined up, which is pretty exciting. And we still have a lot of off-season coverage. We got to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals in the draft. We got to talk about, of course, free agency as well. We'll talk spring training, and we'll dive a little bit more into basketball, which I don't know if that is really a good thing. Xavier had plenty of opportunities against St. John's, lost that game, but I think we all agree Xavier is certainly headed in the right direction there with Coach Pitino at the helm, and then UC loses another game to Arizona State. Get it's on the road, but like that Arizona State team has a very beatable team, a team that UC should have beat. And candidly, they did not compete very well in the game. So feels like Wes Miller's days as the UC Bearcats head coach are numbered here at this point. But appreciate everybody filing in, joining us here on a Monday, a little remote show here as we get things going. But let's start with the NFC side of things. I think certainly this was the game that was more compelling. And the Seahawks ended up winning that game. 31-27 was the final score there. And honestly, my biggest takeaway from this game was watching Matthew Stafford. And I think, personally, that might be one of the most impressive postseason performances in a loss that I've ever seen. Obviously, you had the Brady year when he had the thumb injury and he scored all those points against Philadelphia. Nick Foles threw for like 500 yards, still lost. That certainly is at the top of the list. But some of the throws that he made were just unbelievable in this game. And they went 3-and-out to start initially, and then they had some chunk plays, hitting Nakua on some plays, had to settle for some field goals. I think that was really a storyline early in this game for Los Angeles was their kicker, Mevis. He had some two huge kicks in the game to really keep them in there as, hang in there with that crowd. We always talk about these teams, especially being on the road, taking that punch from the opposition, right? It's that first round against a Conor McGregor style fighter where you just got to hang in there and give yourself a chance on that. In those conditions, which conditions really weren't that bad, but as far as a environment perspective goes, there's no more difficult place to play there in Seattle. And I thought that was a tremendous test. And I thought special teams from Mevis and company early was huge, but special teams is an issue that reared its ugly head once again in this game, which we'll talk about, which is a reoccurring theme for the Rams. And when you look back at the Rams in 25-26, it's going to be the special teams unit, which ultimately held them back. But some of the throws that Stafford made throughout the entirety of the game, multiple times where it looked like they were going to be down and out, and he just made some unbelievable throws, unbelievably accurate with the football, really, from start to finish. And I don't think he really missed many, right? If you look at Matthew Stafford, I think he played just about as good as he possibly could have played in this game. And there's going to be a lot of throws that people don't talk about from Stafford in this game. Down the sideline, Devontae had a couple of unbelievable ones. Parkinson, just balls that were right on the money. That's going to get overshadowed because of ultimately the result of this game. And people are going to talk about, the touchdown to Nakua, touchdown to Kyren Williams, touchdown to Devontae Adams. But it was some of those plays that really set up those touchdowns that I thought were absolutely unbelievable from Matthew Stafford. So I was hoping to have the opportunity to watch him in the Super Bowl. I know a lot of Cincinnati folks aren't exactly Matthew Stafford people, and I totally get it. I was that way for about a year or two, but watching him this year, clearly he's the MVP of the league. That's an award that needs to go to him. I think he's deserving, certainly, of that award, and he showed it in the game last night against Seattle. But ultimately, Sam Darnold and company, the Seattle Seahawks, they come away as winners. They deserve a heck of a lot of credit for it. And, I think a lot of people were doubting Sam Darnold, and for a good reason, right? He had the one playoff game last week. And this is what happens when you're the number one overall seed. You just got to win a couple of games, and you're in the Super Bowl, right? And he didn't have to do anything. He scored 41 points in the game against San Francisco last week. And you're like, well, he must have went off offensively in that game. He threw for 100-some yards. He really didn't have to do anything at all, and they had the lead from the beginning. And a lot of people question how would he perform in a spot like this. Clearly the biggest game of his life, number one seed, going against a better quarterback in Stafford. And, an offensive guru, certainly, and Sean McVay there as well, a team that has had postseason success. And all eyes were on Sam Darnold and how he would play in this game. And I was really impressed with how Darnold played. And he deserves a lot of credit. If you're some of these other teams, that the GM for the Minnesota Vikings and the decision makers there in Minnesota got to be absolutely kicking themselves because they had this guy in their building and they let him walk for a guy in J.J. McCarthy who, at this point, I don't want to call him a bum, but he's kind of heading in that direction as far as being a potential bust here in this league. And they had Sam Darnold in place, and they let him walk. And he's playing with that chip on his shoulder. I thought he made some incredible plays throughout the game. And, we talk about Sam Darnold having that, bozo gene, right? Something that Josh Allen certainly has struggled with for much of his career as well. And, just making bad decisions with the football. We saw Jarrett Stidham. We'll talk about that game in a little bit. Really only had the one mistake, but it proved to be costly in a bad weather game like what they were dealing with in Denver. But, there were opportunities where, they were running that, back to the defense play action stuff, and he's turning around, and there's a guy right in his face. I think Sam Darnold, previous weeks, previous years, tries to play a little hero ball there. Is a little bit careless with the football, doesn't protect it, falls victim to a strip sack or maybe turns it over. As far as the interception goes, there was a couple opportunities for him to do some dumb stuff, and he didn't do it in the game, and he deserves a heck of a lot of credit for it. He made some big-time throws there as well. Again, he hadn't been asked to do anything against San Francisco, and he clearly is not 100%. You saw him wincing over there with the oblique stuff, and the gut through it says a lot about him and his character as a competitor. And he really, rose to the occasion in this game. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't know if anybody can guard him. Brady, the way he describes him is like kind of like an ice skater out there, and I think that's a great way to describe it, honestly, because he's so fluid out there when he's running his routes. He's just kind of gliding throughout the playing surface, and he made huge plays, and it was crazy because there was multiple occasions where he was just wide open, and it's like, how do you let the best player on this offense, in my opinion, Jackson Smith and Jigba, be that open? And there was multiple times where he was, and he made some incredible plays. That was a huge game, particularly in the first half. Had the 10 catches, over 100 yards, had the touchdown there as well, and that's going to be a real issue for New England in the Super Bowl. Gonzalez struggled to start against Denver, but I think he ultimately bounced back and played a pretty good game throughout the rest of that game, but I would assume he's going to be tasked with guarding JSN, and that matchup right there is probably going to dictate who wins the Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco in a couple of weeks. But really thoroughly impressed with JSN, what he was able to do. And how about Cooper Kupp? Kind of perceived to be washed a little bit from Los Angeles. I think the Rams respect the heck out of Cooper Kupp and what he's been able to do in his career to this point. But I think they made the decision of, we got Puka as our one. Who's going to be our two? Devontae Adams is a much better option at this point than Cooper Kupp. And I think Cooper Kupp, if you kind of removed him from the situation and was just like, evaluate these two players yourself, and Devontae, obviously he's going to pick himself, but if you allow him to remove himself from the situation, I think he would say, hey, you know what, at this stage, Devontae is probably a better receiver than me here at this point. So I don't fault the Rams at all for making that move, but I bet Cooper Kupp was some type of fired up coming into this game. And a guy like him, the character in which he has, he would never go out there and say that. But I can promise you, against his former team, against a team that said, yeah, we like you a lot. You're a Super Bowl MVP, Triple Crown winner a couple of years ago, but we're going to move in a different direction and upgrade at your spot. And you're going to have to go to a team in our division. And for him to win that game, I mean, you got to feel pretty good for Cooper Kupp. Again, Bengals fans, the game in which he had Super Bowl MVP. Nobody here in Cincinnati is a Cooper Kupp fan, but you got to respect what he was able to do. It was third down for him, and it was, didn't really do much in the first half, but there was opportunities for him on some third and shorts. Darnold was able to find him, just some huge catches. The touchdown, of course, because I'm sitting there watching this game, and the Rams are continuing to claw back in it, and it's just like, okay, Darnold's got to make a mistake here at some point. They got to go 3 and out here at some point, right? And ultimately, that did not happen as they were able to continue to pick up first downs. They were great on third down. Cooper Kupp was a big reason why. And he has the touchdown, and then he has the game-sealing play there as well. And that's one of, I think, 3 plays that kind of tell the story in this game. In these big games, you can always break it down to a couple of plays, and one of which was the one to Kupp that closed it on the first down. The other, of course, was the taunting penalty on Tariq Woolen, and then the last one, of course, the special teams play. So we'll kind of break through all of those plays there as well. But I thought offensively, JSN's incredible. Kupp made some huge championship-level type plays. Darnold did not make any mistakes. And how about them in the run game as well? I kind of questioned what they would look like, Seattle, offensively from a run game perspective, losing Charbonnet, which, I don't know if it was exactly 50-50 split between Charbonnet and, of course, Kenneth Walker III. But, Charbonnet has the knee injury. He goes down. How are you going to fill out that spot? And they asked Kenneth Walker to do a lot, particularly early in that game. And that was a big tone setter for them because that allowed Sam Darnold to really ease in the game. And they're bursting off these chunk yardage plays where at defensive line for the Rams was just getting manhandled by the offensive front for Seattle. I mean, just seemingly getting pushed back 3-4 yards on each and every play. And Seattle really had their way with them running the football. And I think that set the tone of the game from a physicality perspective. I thought Walker was tremendous. And again, they've asked him to do a lot. I didn't know exactly how much he'd be able to handle that as his role kind of increased with Charbonnet going out, but he absolutely was terrific. And he's going to be certainly an X factor in Super Bowl 60 there as well. But some of the toughness, the physicality, and the speed. The very first touchdown in the game where it's like, oh, they're going to bottle him up, and then he gets the edge, he gets around the corner, and he's in for a touchdown. So he was tremendous in the game. And how about John Schneider? I've been singing his praises for several weeks. When we were evaluating the trade deadline, we sat there and we said, you know what? Getting Rashid Shaheed, that's the best move anybody made at the trade deadline. And it proved to be the case again in this game. Only had the one catch, I believe. But again, just kind of a tone setter for them. Sam Darnold, the pressure of that moment. How are you going to execute? I believe it was on third down. And when you hit a deep ball like that, and that's just Shaheed saying, I'm faster than you. and running right by you. And Darnold gives them a big throw down the sideline, and that kind of allows them to really get things going. It allows your quarterback to settle in, right? And, Stidham got that with the bomb to Mims as well, but just hitting a deep shot early in the first quarter in a big game like that really can settle you down and really help you from a confidence perspective there as well. So I think the moves that John Schneider has made are tremendous. We talk about these two different regimes. I mean, this is historic for a GM to go to a Super Bowl, obviously win a Super Bowl against Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, go back against the Patriots, which is going to be a huge storyline as we progress over these next 2 weeks, lose that game, should have won the game, obviously, but then get back with not a single player on that was on that team that lost to New England in this spot here, and you're going back to the Super Bowl, same GM, of course, in John Schneider, but a different head coach in place, different quarterback in place, and a whole different roster in place there as well. It just speaks to how good John Schneider is at his job and, moving some of the decisions that he made. When he moved, he's just a step ahead. Right, it's easy to sit here and say, "Oh, this guy's washed. Like, let's move on." But Schneider, he's playing chess out there, and he's seeing multiple moves ahead. When he moved off of Russell Wilson, Wilson wasn't at the point where he was in some steep decline. When they moved off him, everybody was like, "Yeah, Russell Wilson can still play football." Wasn't the case, right? Is he really? He left, and then he kind of fell on his face, and it was downhill from there for Russ, certainly in Denver. Right, Pete Carroll, moving off him, he had won a Super Bowl, been to two, won all these games, was constantly competing for the division title in the NFC West. And he says, you know what, we'll move off him as well. So just getting out ahead of these moves was terrific. And, having the wherewithal to pick up a guy like Cooper Kupp, understanding his value, the draft pick of JSN. Remember when JSN was at Ohio State? I was wrong here. I'll go hand up. I didn't think JSN would be this good, because he wasn't even the best receiver on his team at Ohio State. And this is one of the best receivers in the National Football League here at this point. And going into the Super Bowl, he is the best receiver that will be playing in this game. Make no mistake about it. So some of the moves that Schneider has made are just absolutely tremendous. And it's culminating to another performance in the Super Bowl upcoming for the Seattle Seahawks, which is absolutely tremendous. But let's talk about those three plays a little bit: the special teams play, the taunting play, and then the final play, certainly, or kind of the game-sealing play to Cooper Kupp there, as the Rams were without, or they had the one timeout, I guess. But we'll talk about that because Sean McVay completely botched that, and he needs to be held accountable for it, because people want to put him in same conversations as like an Andy Reid, perhaps, but you don't want to play the whole hypothetical thing. But to think that Andy Reid would make a mistake like Sean McVay did with the timeout and the challenge there at the end, pretty hard to believe that's something that would happen. But start with the special teams, right? Seattle scores the touchdown late in the first half. You're kind of watching the Rams get back in it in the second quarter. Again, Mevis hits the two kicks. They're up 13-10. It's like, oh, wow, the Rams are, going to go into half with the lead. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Seattle to score on the opening drive of the second half. And it felt like they were starting to, again, they took that first punch early in the game. They bounced back. You look up, oh my goodness, the Rams had the lead. They're going to take this thing into half. And you got to give the Seattle Seahawks a lot of credit for scoring there on that touchdown. Again, Darnold hung in there, pocket collapsing, wide open. JSN finds him, touchdown. But then you start the second half, and it's 17-13. And if you're the Rams, you're like, okay, we got to get off the field here. Because if you're in a spot where it's 24-13, which ultimately is what ended up coming true, that's a real uphill battle on the road against a really good defense. But Matt Stafford had no issues at all, really, against that defense. And then they forced the 3-and-out. Maybe they gave up one first down, but they forced the punt. And then special teams, an issue for the Los Angeles Rams all year long, rears its ugly head, right? And it was a great punt. I mean, the Seattle punter is the best in the league. It was a perfect spiral, and you saw the guy, Smith, just kind of backtracking, stumbling backwards, and you were like, oh boy, here we go. Something bad's going to happen here for the Rams. Sure enough, I think when you're losing it like that, and I'm not a returner, I'm not a football player, I don't know, but if I was losing it like that and I was stumbling around and wasn't under the football, I'm just getting the heck out of the way, right? As worst case, it takes a advantageous bounce for the kicking team and they down it inside the 5, but it's better than fumbling the football. And he had already muffed one earlier in the game, but he was able to fall on it. And, when you make a decision like that or make a mistake like that, that can really alter the course of the game. And, if there's The Rams had their opportunities, but I mean, that is just a goal. You get in there, you go out there defensively to begin the second half, and you force a punt, and then you're right there. You get your quarterback, the MVP, back on the field. He has an opportunity to go down the field and take the lead, and you commit a fumble on special teams. And you got to wonder with these offensive coaches, if Sean McVay just isn't valuing special teams enough. If you watch the Rams throughout the course of this year, that has been their problem, right? I mean, you remember early in the year against Philly, they go on the road to Philadelphia, outplay them, or in a position to win. Field goal gets blocked. I mean, it's literally everything. Turning the ball over, muffing punts, muffing kicks, not covering well, getting stuff blocked. Like, it just can't happen in the National Football League. And you never saw that with teams like the Patriots, right? Belichick always had that special teams unit buttoned up. Saban at Alabama, yeah, he had some really bad kickers that missed a lot of kicks. Obviously, the kick six, everybody remembers that. But they were buttoned up, right? They didn't really make a ton of mistakes there. And some of these good teams in previous years, the Chiefs, they don't make a ton of mistakes on special teams. They're not going to wow you necessarily with making great plays here left and right, but they're not going to make a ton of mistakes like that. And it's been an issue for the Rams all year, and it rears its ugly head in the biggest game of the year. And I think when you look back on this season for Los Angeles here in 25-26, that's going to be ultimately what ended their season, the special teams. And you're in that spot and you're like, well, at least we have Matthew Stafford. We have a chance here. But it just completely takes the wind out of your sails where your defense goes out there, gets a stop, right? Forces a punt. You're getting the football back. And all of a sudden you fumble next play too. It's one thing if it's like, okay, it takes a couple of plays for them to score. Darnold finds Bobo immediately, of all people, his fourth catch of the year. It's a touchdown and, the biggest game certainly in his life. There in the second half, and the Seahawks extend their lead and go up 2 scores. And again, people are going to remember plays like that. People are going to talk about how Sam Darnold made all the right throws, but bouncing back the way Stafford did in the second half, there was multiple points in the third quarter where it was like, oh, this Rams team's cooked, right? They're done, right? And Stafford would just make huge throw after huge throw, and they weren't just like little checkdowns. They were deep down the field, and just the precision and the accuracy that he was operating with was absolutely unbelievable there. But a huge mistake, huge costly mistake there for the Los Angeles Rams on special teams. And then one of the other stories of the game, whereas, this was, I think, after the first touchdown from the Rams. And if you remember, like, if you look at these possessions in the box score, like, they exchanged touchdowns. It was 4 straight drives there in the third quarter, right? The third quarter was 14-14. They just went touchdown, 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 touchdown. And, it looked like the Seattle defense had gotten off the field. It was 4th and 12. And then Tariq Woolen goes over onto the Rams sideline. He's running his mouth. He gets a taunting penalty. And ultimately, that is an automatic first down for Los Angeles. And similar to how the Seahawks capitalized on one play after the special teams miscue for Los Angeles, it only took one play for Stafford to find Nakua there for the touchdown and just kind of gave life back into the Rams. And it kind of felt like that. It wasn't over. It's never over with Matthew Stafford. But if you're forcing a punt there, the Rams are in deep, deep trouble. And you just gift them a first down and then ultimately gift them a touchdown as well. And, evaluating the play, Woolen has to understand he cannot do that, right? This is the NFC Championship game. You just made a huge play, right? Breaking up a pass on 3rd and 12, forcing a punt. Your team's up 2 scores. You want to talk? That's fine, right? But you have to understand that is the way it's going to be officiated. And he didn't just talk. He went over to their sideline, right? If he's just talking and he's on the playing surface, doesn't get flagged. But the fact that he is out there on the sideline for Los Angeles there as well, it's absolutely ridiculous that he would do something like that. And again, this is professional football. It's not peewee football. Can you make the argument that it shouldn't have been a flag? Certainly. It seems a bit soft that it was flagged, if we're being completely honest. But he has to understand that he can't do that. And how about Matthew Stafford understanding that, hey, we're just going to go to Woolen here in this spot. The very next play, Stafford was kind of exchanging some words with him, and he said, you know what, I'm going right after you the next play. And then Puka Nakua is there to make a play down the sideline for a touchdown. Initial bobble, but is able to hold it. I thought Puka was great. Puka's been great all year. Talking about draft picks, how about that for the Los Angeles Rams, getting Puka Nakua where they got him. He's one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. And have him, Adams, JSN out there with great quarterback play. You really couldn't ask for much more in this game, especially after a lackluster game in the AFC Championship between New England and Denver, which we'll talk about in a second. So those 2 plays were huge. The special teams fiasco and, of course, the taunting penalty. And then the third play, which Before we get into that, let's kind of talk about that drive for the Rams as they got the ball with like 7 or 8 minutes. And you never know in these games. Sometimes like when it becomes the fourth quarter, it could be game on there at that point. You never know if you're going to be able to have an opportunity to possess the football again and have another real chance. And I thought Stafford on that drive was unbelievable. Works his way down the field. He had to use his legs, I think, twice on the drive. The 4th and 1, Brady's sitting there saying, run it. They had numbers there to run it against the line of scrimmage. Then Stafford ends up taking it, gets the first down. Thought he made great throws and decisions for them to get to that point. And then they had a couple of plays. It was a 3rd and 4 and a 4th and 4. And ultimately, we're not able to convert in that spot. And you saw McVay running down the sideline, thinking about calling a timeout because he didn't know if he had the right look, and then deciding, you know what, I want to keep all of my timeouts because in his mind, he's thinking, ain't no way that, there was, 4.5 minutes left. He's thinking, ain't no way that, we're not going to have another crack at this thing. So he rolls the dice. Play doesn't work, and then the Rams never really had another opportunity from there. So if there's one knock on Stafford, it's, you didn't get in the end zone there when you had a couple of chances, 3rd and 4, 4th and 4 situations. I get it, but it was covered really well by Seattle. Again, we talk about this Seattle defense, and they've got some guys on there that want to try to make a name for themselves. And, you had the Legion of Boom. I forget what they were calling themselves, but it's like, all right, let's, you only have a team like the Legion of Boom. That only comes up once in a blue moon. These guys aren't even close to that level. And again, it took the MVP to make them look bad. But 27 points. And, if you take some field goals, you're in a position where you're going to score some more points than that there as well. So, I was really impressed with the Rams offensively. And we'll see how Seattle plays in the Super Bowl. Maybe they shut down Drake May and they don't even have a chance. We'll see. But I thought, that they're not as good as the Houston Texans defense, which of course lost to New England last week. But McVay's thinking he's going to get the ball back. Ultimately, he does not. But with 20 seconds left, not a real chance there. But then you get into the last drive by Seattle, and you got to give Kubiak a lot of credit because I would have just been, for much of that drive, I would have been turning around, handing the football off, and that's not what they did. They got the defensive holding, which was huge, allows them to get the first down there, and that's why it just can't happen, right? It's no reason to be grabbing there. It would have been an incompletion, and the Rams would have had all types of life. He was throwing it to JSN, and that's not even the guy. I think it was Cup that was getting held. So that absolutely cannot happen if you're Los Angeles. Just a blown opportunity. But the third down where they threw it and they got the Cup, and initially live, I didn't think he had it. And what McVay did was he called timeout, and then it wasn't under 2 minutes, so they weren't going to review it automatically, which you could say, well, that's a stupid rule. It should be reviewed automatically. I would agree with that. It's the NFC Championship game, right? Everything, when it's late, crunch time, fourth quarter, take a look at it. But it wasn't under 2 minutes, so it wasn't going to be automatically reviewed. And then McVay called the timeout and then was thinking about challenging it. Well, then if you challenge it and you don't get it, there goes another timeout. So basically, you're burning 2 timeouts there at this point. And that was you don't expect a coach like Sean McVay to make that mistake. He wanted to challenge it. Now, the reason he didn't is he goes, well, I can't look like an idiot and challenge it and not get it, and then I lose 2 timeouts. And it was very, very close. I don't know if it would have gotten overturned. My gut says it wouldn't have been because, when they slow it down, what a great effort by Cooper Kupp, just the wherewithal of him, understanding where he's at on the playing surface, right? Again, just a smart, cerebral guy. Cooper Kupp always is a guy that you can go to in a huge situation. Bengals know firsthand, of course. And, they're in that spot. You have JSN, but I'm going to Cooper Kupp. Third, and you need a first down, game on the line. He knows where the sticks are at, and it looked like he just barely got it. Again, McVay wanted to challenge it. He didn't because he didn't want to lose 2 timeouts there at that point. So the decision for him, he should have thrown the flag right before calling the timeout. And then if he doesn't get it, he just loses the 1 timeout, but the clock stops. Instead, he called the timeout and then was like, well, I want to challenge it, and then realized, it's not automatically going to be reviewed within 2 minutes. So now I'm in a spot where if I challenge it and I don't get it, I'm losing 2 timeouts, and he couldn't afford to do that there at that point. But just a very costly mistake, but a great play by Darnold and Kubiak. Again, they drew up a couple of passing plays on that drive, which I was shocked, right, that they did that because, if you chew all the clock, and make the Rams use their timeouts, I would just roll the dice. But they understood that Stafford was on the other side. They wanted to throw it, and it worked out. So Kubiak I'm a little side note on this game. Kubiak should be hired by Vegas or Cleveland or one of these openings that are still open. They should hire Kubiak. That was a tremendous performance. And as far as Chris Shula goes, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole if I'm any of these openings because, I mean, he just got worked all game long. And, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, I don't know if you can make a decision to go forward with him as your head coach if you're one of these teams looking for a head coach still here at this point. But got to give a ton of credit to Seattle. I was rooting a little bit for the Rams. I obviously predicted the Rams to play the Patriots in the Super Bowl, but they deserve a lot of credit. They've been people have kind of just said, yeah, they got this good defense, they got this home field advantage, they're the 1 seed, but it's Sam Darnold, it's this head coach that's in year 2. They know what they're doing, right? They're a very well run operation organization. Schneider's done a tremendous job. McDonald, like he is in that category as far as the top guys in the National Football League. Absolutely belongs there. He was sensational. Darnold was great. JSN was great. Defense made some plays when they had to, and ultimately rose to the occasion and won the game. But several key plays that we'll continue to talk about. The McVay, of course, at the end of the game, not challenging. The plays, of course, that Smith and Jigma made throughout the duration of the game. But then, the special teams miscue, the taunting penalty. But Seattle was able to do just enough. Home field advantage is huge, right? It shows you, man, if you can get the 1 seed and then you just got to play 2 games and you get them both at home, especially if you're a town like Seattle and you have that kind of environment, that is a huge, huge advantage, right? And, when we talk about here in Cincinnati, if the Bengals could just get the 1 seed and then you get 1 less game, I understand the home field advantage in the jungle isn't quite the same as it is in Seattle, but it just goes a really long way. That's why the Patriots were able to be so dominant for so long. Oftentimes, more times than not, they weren't playing the first week and they were playing all their games at Gillette Stadium. It's a huge, huge advantage. And Seattle will go on to play in the Super Bowl, and then that'll be a fun storyline, right? An opportunity, a rematch with the Patriots, obviously completely different. New head coaches, new quarterbacks, new players all over the place. But that'll be a fun storyline to continue to discuss. So I think Matthew Stafford's performance will get lost in the loss. He absolutely should come back if he wants to come back. And he just won the MVP. He should win the MVP. He's playing at an elite level. Again, as a Bengals fan, I had some disdain towards Matthew Stafford the past couple of years, but this year I really was able to just hop on board and just enjoy watching him play because, what he can do with the football, and he's got really no mobility. I know he had the 2 runs there on the final drive or their last chance to score, but he's really just a statue back there, and he can make all the throws, and he was so precise and so accurate. And, as far as quarterback performances and losing efforts in the postseason, you have the Brady Super Bowl against Philadelphia, but this game for Matthew Stafford, to me, is right there at the top because, Darnold, I'm not taking anything away from Sam Darnold. He played great. He won the game, deserved to win the game, but I thought Matthew Stafford played better, certainly in the game than Sam Darnold. But Seahawks, they have an opportunity to go to a Super Bowl and try to win another one. Obviously, it's been a minute since they won one, but Schneider has done a great job, and they deserve a heck of a lot of credit for it. All right, on the AFC side of things, not exactly as entertaining of a football game. New England and the Denver Broncos. It's in Denver. Storyline, of course, is that no Bo Nix. Bo Nix is out, fractured ankle. Jarrett Stidham is in. And you saw a lot of confidence around Sean Payton, which, look, I get it. What's he going to do? Stand up there and say, yeah, you know what? Bo's out. We got this guy Stiddy, who I like him as a backup, but he's got to play in the AFC Championship game. Yeah, we're probably screwed here at this point. No, he's not going to say that. He's going to give him some confidence. I thought the way they handled it from a PR perspective was great. Like, they didn't waste any time. They didn't sit there and say, oh, my goodness, what are we going to do? Right when they got the news that Bo was out, we're going right back to the podium, calling an emergency press conference and letting everybody know that he's out and Stidham is in. If the weather is better, does the outcome of the game change? Maybe. If Bo Nix is playing, does the outcome of the game change? Maybe. But I think the New England Patriots deserve so much credit for understanding the type of game that it was and understanding what was required in order for them to go out and win the football game. Drake May. Nobody has supported the Patriots this year and supported Drake May more than me. Right? I've been on them from the jump. They had the slow start, but then they started winning. I was like, this is not a fluke. This is for real. This isn't some, this isn't fairy dust. This isn't, some pipe dream. They can win the Super Bowl. And here they are, 60 minutes away from making it happen. Obviously, Drake May is going to have to play better because you look at, and I'm not just saying look at the stats, right? It was a mess of a game in the second half. I don't care that he threw for 70 yards or whatever it was. That doesn't bother me. But when the game was clean in the first half, he was terrible, right? Drake May, I mean, it was crazy. And Romo was talking about this, and I totally agree. I can't remember a game where the weather shifted that dramatically throughout the course of the game. I mean, first half, I was like, oh, it's fine. It's a little cold, right? And then it's like, okay, there's some flurries here. And then all of a sudden, second half, it's a full-fledged blizzard, wind all over the place. If you're going against the wind, you had no chance, which is where New England was going in the fourth quarter, where Denver was going in the third quarter, right? And then you can hardly see, right? And Roma also made the point about the white jerseys. Like, that was a huge advantage for the New England Patriots to be wearing white and that. I mean, I'm sitting there watching, they're running around on defense. Like, I can't see the Patriots. I'm sitting there watching on TV. It had to be a heck of a lot worse there in person. But I give Sean Payton a lot of credit for the game plan going in. Stidham really only had the one. They drew up the wide receiver screen, and he missed him, and he was laughing about it afterwards. That was really his only, like, oh, this guy's nervous. And I thought after that point, he really settled in, and Sean Payton dialed up some great stuff, particularly in the first quarter. The deep shot to Mims on third down against Gonzalez, too. There was 2 plays there in the first quarter where I'm sitting there watching them going, what is going on with Christian Gonzalez? I mean, this is a lockdown dude. This is the real deal there at corner for the New England Patriots. And again, he's going to be tasked with JSN in the Super Bowl. That matchup's going to be unbelievable. As the game went on, Gonzalez played a heck of a lot better and had the game-winning interception, of course, there as well. But he got beat on a couple occasions there early, had his eyes in the backfield on the touchdown to Sutton. But I thought Sean Payton was tremendous, really helping out his quarterback. They were running the football a little bit there in the first quarter. They hit the deep shot to Mims, and then a beautiful design on the touchdown to Cortland Sutton. And they're up 7-0. And we talked about, the 3 plays that really stood out to me in the Seattle game. There's two or three plays that stood out in this Denver-New England game there as well. And you're thinking at first that maybe it wouldn't be a storyline of the game because it happened with like 9 minutes left in the second quarter. But the Denver Broncos were absolutely dominating this football game. Dominating, right? That first quarter was as one-sided as it gets. And for much of the second quarter, it was as one-sided as it gets there as well. And they're on the 14-yard line. It's a 4th-and-1 situation. And you have a backup quarterback. Right. He was playing great to that point. I understand that. But it is a backup quarterback in a game that if you win, you're going to the Super Bowl. And Sean Payton says, we're leaving our offense out there. We're going for it. If they had just kicked it in that spot, go up 10-0. I get it's 4th-and-1. And I get if you're a head coach, you're perceived as soft these days if you aren't going for it on 4th-and-1, which I don't get at all. Right. You're seeing. We thought like 4 or 5 years ago, it'd be like, oh, offensive coaches, that's the way to go. And I still think if you're picking between the two, that's the way to go. But you're looking at defensive coaches having success now. McDonald, right? Vrabel, 2 coaches in the Super Bowl, right? Things change in this league. Minter just got hired in the AFC North. Things change. One thing that I hope changes a little bit going forward is that some of these coaches stop being so reckless. And it's borderline stupidity is what it is, right? Again, AFC Championship game. You're 60, at the time it was a little bit more, but if you win this game, you're 60 minutes away from hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. You have a backup quarterback. You are dominating the game. And Drake May, which people aren't even going to discuss this because they ended up winning, Drake May in that first quarter and for much of the second quarter looked like a scared puppy. He really did. He looked like he had no clue what was going on. He short-armed like 3 or 4 passes, something we haven't seen from him all year. Just the nerves were getting to him. I get it. He's 23 years old. He's playing in the biggest game of his life. It's the AFC Championship game on the road. I would be scared out of my mind as well, right? You had a chance to send out your kicker for a chip shot field goal opportunity and go up 2 scores, right? I get it. If you pick up the first down, you score a touchdown, you go 14, that feels like a heck of a lot more. But 2 scores, the way that your team was dominating that game and how bad New England looked offensively, Sean Payton sticks to his guns, goes for it. And they don't get it. And, people are poking fun at Tony Romo, but he hit a couple of things right on the head in this game. And one is just how situationally aware New England is. They've been this way all year. And it reminds you of the OG Patriots with Brady and Belichick, right? In those huge moments, those 4th and shorts, there's those 3rd and shorts, the special teams plays, critical plays late in the game. They're always buttoned up. right? And it didn't surprise me at all. The New England Patriots were getting dominated there, and they left the offense out there on 4th and 1. I said to myself, they're not getting this. New England's coming up with a stop here. New England had done one thing good all game to that point, and they come up with a huge play, and all of a sudden they're sitting there like, well, we just forced a turnover on downs. It's a one-score game, and we've got the momentum back. All right, if a field goal is kicked there, and then Drake May's looking up going, now it's 2 scores. I got to make something happen here. Sean Payton ends up not making that decision. He goes for it, and I would like to see coaches shift that philosophy because I just don't get it. Right? Week 4, week 5, and if you know it's going to be a shootout, fine. But it's cold. You have a backup quarterback. It's a huge game. These playoff games come down to 1 or 2 plays. Take the points. There's 3 points right there for the taking, and they didn't do it. And Tony Romo was all over it, and he understood, even though that it was early, that it was going to be huge. And now you look back at the game, and that's the story of the game right there. Because if they go up 2 scores, who knows what happens? And maybe you don't have the fumble from Stidham, which we'll get to in a second. And frankly, let's just get to it right now. Jarrett Stidham, I think really for the most part, if you're a Bronco fan, you have to be like, you know what, I'm kind of pleased with how Stidham played. But there's 2 plays, the interception, of course, but it was, the weather at that point was like unplayable, really, is what it was. Borderline unplayable at that point. But then the fumble. And he did this a couple of times throughout the game. And it's just what happens when you haven't been out there playing, right? It's like holding on to the ball. There were so many times where it's like, dude, throw the football away. And he tried to do the little shovel pass to get rid of it. He kind of double clutched, ends up being a fumble because it was a backwards pass. And the Patriots kind of got hosed in that spot, I certainly thought, because they blew it dead, right? They scored a touchdown. And I was like, oh, they blew it dead. And it's like, oh, is New England going to be able to score against this Denver defense? Ultimately, they did after a couple of plays. Drake May uses his legs. That was huge. But you're like, well, that was a break that Stidham made the mistake that he made if you're New England, but also it was a bad break because you scored a touchdown on the play and they blew it dead. So, again, in those spots, you can't have that if you're officials here. You got to let the play roll out. And they blew it dead, and then New England had to do some work in order to get in the end zone, but they did. And then you look up at the scoreboard, if you're the Patriots, and you go, we have played terrible. We haven't really done anything right. In fact, we've only done one thing right, and that was get the stop on 4th down, and we're tied here on the road. And you just have all the confidence in the world if you're the New England Patriots. And again, right, even if that mistake happens from Jarrett Stidham, he fumbles the football, he throws it backwards, you should have had a 3-point lead at that point, but they didn't. And, that's what happens when you're in these games and you don't take points where they're right there in front of you. That's a serious, serious issue for you as a football team. And it gave Drake May some confidence as well. Again, he looked out of sorts. Don't blame him at all. He's going to have to play. He hasn't played a good game yet in the postseason. He's done enough to win. And that's something that all great quarterbacks have the ability to do. Recognize what type of game it is. Not try to play hero ball, something that Sam Darnold has struggled with for so much of his career. Certainly didn't yesterday. But Drake May's like, well, they don't really need me to do a ton in order to win this game. I just got to, keep my head screwed on properly and not do anything reckless. Credit to him, he's been able to do that, but he's going to have to play a heck of a lot better going forward. And then you get to the early stages of the third quarter. Credit to Josh McDaniels. I don't know if New England knew what weather was coming and Denver didn't or what, but they were like, yeah, we're just going to run the football. And that was what they were trying to do throughout the entirety of the game. That was the game plan. New England said, we're going to come here, we're going to run football with Ramondre Stevenson. And that first drive coming out of halftime, they go all the way down the field. It only resulted in 3. Obviously ended up being the game-winning field goal from Borregales. But they just ran it basically the whole drive. They chewed up like 10 minutes of clock. You look up and you're like, oh, my goodness, there's 5 minutes left in the third quarter. And they had a lead, and then the weather really starts to come in. And as I mentioned earlier, I haven't seen a game that's been as shifted so drastically from start to finish as far as the weather goes. Because, again, you're kicking off the game, and it's like, sun's shining, looks fine. And then you get to that mid-stage point, really after that field goal from New England in the third quarter, and it was kind of unplayable. And I'm not one of those people where I think all the games should be in the dome. I don't think that. I think it's part of football. I think it was, It was cool to see them have to deal with that kind of stuff in a game like that. But at the same time, it's like you're a game away from the Super Bowl. Don't you want to see these teams both be at their best? I get the arguments to both sides. I'm not ready to, put all these games in the dome. Now that type of environment can't happen in the Super Bowl, but it won't, right? They played the one in New York when it was Seattle, funnily enough, the last time they were in it, or the last time they won it, against Denver, and then you're worried about the weather there. Ended up being fine. Yeah, it was a little chilly, but it was fine. Super Bowl, you can't have weather like that. But I'm still at the point where it's like, it's conference championship. It's playoff football. It gets nasty out there. So I'm not, you're seeing more of these teams start to build these domes, but I don't think it needs to be mandatory here at this point. But let's be honest, the Denver Broncos have a much better chance at winning the game if the weather was normal, right? I mean, they got to the spot where it's like, well, we're down, and like you're not really scoring unless the other team makes a mistake, right? That's kind of what the Broncos ended up trying to bank on. It's like, we just need New England to make a mistake here for us to have a chance to score, and ultimately it didn't happen. So, I mean, technically it was boring in the second half because it's literally 3-and-out, punt, miss field goal, punt, miss field goal, punt, punt, punt. And that's not, exciting. But at the same time, you were on the edge of your seat because any mistake, right, any fumble, any blocked punt or something along those lines would have flipped this game on its head. But I credit to New England for understanding where things were at. And again, I don't know if they knew that what weather was coming in before, but they really prioritized, we're going to go down here on this first drive and score points. They did it by running the football. They kicked the field goal. And then the weather comes in, and they're just like, yeah, we're just going to, punt the ball back to you, play defense, right? I mean, they literally had the one play on third down where the play was, we're going to roll out of the pocket and throw it away with a 3-point lead in the AFC Championship game. That was their play. So, again, if it's just snow, it's one thing because that's what, Cincinnati and Buffalo, the regular season this year, and of course the playoff game a couple of years ago, where it's just snow and it's like, oh, this is great. Like, just sling this thing around. When it's snow and the wind, right, and the visibility is so low, and it was like hard, like it wasn't like Christmas snow coming down, like it was hard, ugly snow with wind, and you could hardly see it on TV. The white jerseys, I think, were a huge advantage for New England. I really think that is true. I mean, you had Jim Nantz sitting there going, yeah, we don't really know where the football's at right now. We'll let you know in a second, like 35, 40-yard line, somewhere in there. But you had no clue. And they were trying to do the thing at first where they kind of like utilized the white or the yellow line for first down. They tried to do that on the numbers and hash marks, and that looked kind of funky. So they went away from that. But, yeah, it's just New England understood what kind of game it was. And they're like, all right, we're just going to play defense and not make any mistakes. And they had the huge block. It looked initially like Lutz missed it, but there was a finger on that. Again, I agree with Romo. I think it was up and good had they not gotten a finger on it. But ultimately, they were able to get the block, and that was enough to win them the game. So when you look at the turnaround from New England, it is tremendous. The fact that they go to all the Super Bowls, win 6 of them with Brady, they move off of Belichick, right call by Robert Kraft. And I think you got to talk about him as maybe the best owner of all time here at this point. And he's done some things that are, it's easy to poke fun at him for some of the stuff he's done, certainly. But he knows what he's doing. He's a rich guy that can put together a really good football team and hire the right people. And you have the generation of Brady and Belichick. And then you go belly up for 2 years, back-to-back 4 and 13 seasons. You get the head coach right, you get the quarterback right. And in this league, man, when you get those boxes checked, the sky's the limit for you. And here you are in a position to go win the Super Bowl. I think a lot of people will compare him to the Bengals a couple of years ago. I think that Bengals team has a lot more star power, obviously. May's great. And Burrow wasn't a hero necessarily throughout the playoff run, but he played a heck of a lot better than what Drake May is doing right now. It was a heck of a lot more impactful. Obviously, you had Jamar and T. You don't have those guys for New England. But as far as just second-year quarterback, young head coach, this is year 1 for Brable in New England. It was, year 3 for Zach in Cincinnati. So certainly a little bit different there. But I get the similarities. I mean, you look at the point spread in the Super Bowl, it's identical, right? Bengals went in that game as 4.5-point dogs. That is where New England finds themselves at right now, or at least when it opened, 4.5-point underdogs. And we'll see ultimately how they're going to compete. I totally understand them being an underdog. We'll talk more about the Super Bowl matchup going forward, but they just deserve a ton of credit for understanding what it takes to win. People making fun of Romo, but situationally aware, right? If you're situationally aware and you're great at your best in those big time moments, and just like the play from Drake May before the half, it ended up not mattering because they missed the field goal. but like he's running and then has the wherewithal to get down with 1 second. Vrabel calls the timeout right on time. Like that was executed perfectly. And they deserve a ton of credit for that, just to give Borregales an opportunity, right? I mean, I was sitting there thinking, well, what's this guy doing here? You're running out of time. And then boom, he gets down with 1 second. They pop the timeout off and they look at the review, they review it and they're like, yep, they got it off. He's down. There's 1 second. And they got an opportunity there. So that just speaks to coaching, and the Patriots are so well coached. That's the takeaway here. I mean, you look at this team and, you could say it's a bunch of misfits. I mean, maybe relative to the Seahawks, maybe a little bit, but they got some dudes on that team. They know how to play well. They know how to play well together, and they know how to win, right? And, we talk about it like the Bengals, right? This team, they make a lot of great plays. They score a lot of points. They don't know how to win. Their quarterback does, but they don't have enough guys that know how to win. This Patriots team, they're built of a bunch of winners, and they should be underdogs absolutely in this game, but they got some life. It would not surprise me at all if they're hoisting Lombardi after this year, but they deserve a heck of a lot of credit. I think Sean Payton deserves credit as well for Denver. It's a pretty quick turnaround. He came in with Russell Wilson. That wasn't his guy. Going to the playoffs back-to-back years with Bo Nix has been tremendous. Does this game look different if Bo Nix plays? Probably, but then, McDaniels calls it different as well for New England offensively, right? Again, they just were like, we'll just keep punting it to you and we'll play defense. Probably a little bit different if Nix is playing, but then again, in the second half, I don't think Bo Nix is doing anything more than Jarrett Stidham. So the people out there that say, oh, we win that game, if you're a Bronco fan, oh, we win that game if Bo Nix is playing, maybe in the first half, but the second half doesn't. I mean, you had no chance in the second half. I don't fault Stidham at all for how the second half went. He had the interception. It was time to, force something. He threw it up. The wind got it, and ultimately wasn't even close to being caught. Gonzalez, credit to him for squeezing it, but I don't fault Stidham at all for that. I only fault Stidham for the one play, and it was the backwards pass. But I thought, for the most part, that's about as good as you could have expected from Stidham to play. And honestly, he should be happy with how he played. Obviously, he's distraught that they lost, but I do not put that on Jarrett Stidham at all. Sean Payton, when he made the decision to go, he's not thinking it's going to cost him the game. 9 minutes left in the second quarter? But when you lose the game 10-7, it does. So Payton deserves a lot of credit. If Knicks can come back healthy, they'll be a problem for a while. But when you have these opportunities, when you're the 1 seed, you have the bye, oftentimes you got to be able to capitalize in these moments. And no fault to Denver. Their quarterback got hurt. It happens. But I think, no disrespect to the Broncos, but I think the country as a whole probably at this point is like, we're kind of happy New England won that, so you don't have to see a backup in the Super Bowl. But I was impressed with how Stidham competed in the game. And the Patriots, they just know how to win. And people may have thought that left with Belichick. Well, it's back with Mike Vrabel, and they'll play against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. All right, a couple of minutes before we get out of here, do want to touch on this Bengals-related topic with Mike McCarthy being hired as the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't think people should be surprised by this. You can point at him and make fun of him and laugh at him for the decision. I think that's totally fine because it is kind of funny that they're hiring Mike McCarthy. But when you heard the ownership group, Rooney's talk for Pittsburgh, they're like, no, we don't want to rebuild. We want to keep going at this thing, which – I'm not always a fan of, blow it up and then go from there. But I think it couldn't have been more evident that that's what Pittsburgh needs to do, because it feels like they're kind of just in purgatory here at this point, where it's like, they'll win 9-10 games, not have a losing record, but they're losing the first round of the playoffs. And it kind of feels like that's going to continue here for Pittsburgh. You bring in Mike McCarthy, and I think Mike McCarthy gets a little bit too much disrespect. The guy can coach football. I thought it was interesting that he wasn't getting as much action in this cycle. I thought there would be a lot of teams that were interested in his services, and it became pretty clear that if Pittsburgh wasn't hiring him, he wasn't getting hired. I know he had some conversations with Tennessee, but I think that was really it for Mike McCarthy. So, this was like his one chance, I think, his last chance to be a head coach, and he gets it, which when you look at McCarthy's career, you got to give him some respect, because he's now been the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, which those are like the 3 most iconic franchises, you could argue, in the National Football League. But he's going to win games, right? He's not going to win playoff games. He's not going to get you to the Super Bowl, but he's not going to get you a top 10 pick, right? I think they're going to find ways to win with Mike McCarthy, and I think the Steelers are kind of just going to be stuck And I think this is great for the Cincinnati Bengals. When I look at these hirings, we'll kind of pair this in a little bit to our Browns conversation. Tomlin, Harbaugh, Stefanski out. I think Harbaugh and Tomlin are Hall of Fame guys. Maybe that's crazy to say. I think Harbaugh definitely is. I think he'll cement that when he has success in New York. Tomlin's won so much, has the Super Bowl. He deserves a ton of credit. Went to another one, right? And we're sitting there going, all these guys are leaving the division, right? And everybody was laughing when Zach Taylor was the only guy left standing. And everyone was like, well, Zach Taylor is the best head coach in the AFC North. Well, there wasn't three other coaches at that point. He was the only coach in the AFC North. And obviously there's one position still to be filled. There's a real world where Zach Taylor goes into week 1 next year, or goes into training camp, or goes into free agency, goes into the draft as the best head coach in the AFC North. And I know I've defended Zach Taylor for a long time, and I've been pro Zach Taylor. That's not crazy to say, right? Zach Taylor or Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has more of a resume, but I would take Zach Taylor at this point. Zach Taylor or Jesse Minter. I'm taking Zach Taylor at this point. And do you really trust the Browns on executing this thing? That whole thing's a mess with Cleveland. No, I don't. So I think this is great for the Bengals. I don't think to this point the offseason really could have gone any better. We'll see. Obviously, with the draft and free agency, there's a lot to do. But just at the scope of this division, right? Tomlin and Harbaugh are out, and you replace them with Minter and McCarthy? I'm like, sure, sign me up, right? I don't think this really could have gone much better for Cincinnati, honestly. So Pittsburgh, I think, is going to remain in purgatory. That front office, their GM, Omar Khan, I mean, you look at this roster for Pittsburgh, I don't think there is a roster in a worse shape than the Pittsburgh Steelers for going forward. They have no young talent. Porter's a nice piece at corner, but they got old guys all over the place. And I made this joke during the season. I've been a huge Aaron Rodgers guy my whole life, but you look at this roster and it looks like something you and I did on Madden. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll bring Aaron Rodgers in here. That'll be fun. Jalen Ramsey was pretty good for a while. Let's bring him in here. Yeah, TJ Watt, he's had a ton of sacks. Let's pay him. Right? Let's pay him a ton of money. Right? Hayward, yeah, he's been great for us for a while. He'll keep playing. He'll keep starting. Right? DK Metcalf, yeah, trade for him. Right? He's awesome. No, that's not how the real world works, and they're operating it like they're playing Madden. And now McCarthy's going to come in here, and again, he wins games, so they're not going to have a top 10 pick probably. But he's got decisions to make. I think you have to cut DK Metcalf and move off him there at that point, but we'll see. And you've got no like young pieces to build around. Like Joey Porter Jr. is like your only guy. Like even your running back, Warren, he's getting up there in age. Gainwell, he was great for you this year, but is he a piece for you going forward? He's kind of been a bit of a bounce around guy. He's not, the youngest guy in the world either, right? Offensive line, you got a couple of young pieces there. I don't think anyone's really convinced they're really good players, right? And defensively, it's a bunch of old dudes. You're paying all your money on defense, and they're all old, right? Herbig and Highsmith are great, good players, but they're no spring chickens either. So I don't know. They got a lot of work to do. It'll be fascinating to see if Rodgers comes back, because I thought they were in a spot where 100% he would not come back as their head coach next year, or their quarterback next year. But now you bring his boy McCarthy in. It's like, well, they might run this thing back one more time with Aaron Rodgers, which great, right? I'll sign up to watch Aaron Rodgers, right? You'll win 9 or 10 games, but you're not winning playoff games, right? It'll be fascinating to see if they, are they going to roll with Bill Howard? I don't think that's the end of the world, the worst decision in the world if they ultimately decide to roll with Bill Howard. He was a 6th round guy, but like Gabriel went in the 3rd round. I wouldn't have picked Bill Howard in the 3rd round, but NFL quarterback, Howard or Gabriel, I would take Howard, right? So I think he was better than a 6th round pick, and he has that, he's tough, right? I give him credit for that. He's won big games, obviously, at Ohio State, played a lot of football at Kansas State before playing at Ohio State. So, as far as 6th round picks go, I think there's more optimism to go with a guy like Howard. Shoot, I would go with him over a guy like Shedeur Sanders, honestly, at this point. But if you continue to win 9 or 10 games, you're not going to be able to find a quarterback for the future. Who knows? Maybe Howard can be that guy. I have my doubts and reservations on whether or not that's true. But they're just kind of in purgatory here, where it's like they're not going to be a threat to win playoff games, but they're not going to go belly up on this thing. And I think it's a mistake for Pittsburgh. I'm not usually the guy that's in favor of saying, oh, blow the whole thing up, let's restart. But if there was ever a time to do it, it was here in Pittsburgh. Proof is in the pudding. You win 9 or 10 games a year and get blown out in the 1st round. Like that's what happens with Pittsburgh. And you would think they would do a full restart. bring in a younger coach, but no, they're going to bring in McCarthy, who's just going to get you 9 or 10 wins here at this point. So I think that, was a mistake, and I think that's great for the Cincinnati Bengals as well, for being completely honest. I think the Minter hire, the McCarthy hire, Minter might be good. Maybe I'm disrespecting him a little bit too much, but he ain't John Harbaugh. I tell you that much. He ain't John Harbaugh. Lastly, before we get out of here, we'll talk a little bit about Cleveland. There's been some reports surfacing about the Browns, their head coaching search. They're just a complete mess. It's, we sit here in Cincinnati and, we're frustrated with the organization, the mom and pop nature, the, waiting too long to make decisions, not paying people, not making wholesale changes. At least we're not the Cleveland Browns, right? They don't have people interested in taking their head coaching job. There's now 3 guys, the Jacksonville OC, Udinsky. He just removed himself from consideration as well. Or it's like, actually, you know what? I would rather stay a coordinator. I don't want to be the head coach of your team because you're such a clown show. And apparently reports have come out that the Browns are asking these candidates to do homework and write essays and take personality tests. I don't bang them too much for the personality tests. It's just kind of the world we're in right now. I don't think that's the end of the world. Should that go over to football? You could make the argument it shouldn't, but I'm not too worked up about that. But writing essays and doing homework, are you kidding me? Right? You're going to write essays to tell us why you should be the head coach. And I know Barry's an Ivy League guy and he's, big education background. I get that. I respect that, right? Mom's an educator. Got no issues there with that at all. But you're going to write an essay to tell me why you should be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns? Are you kidding me? And then you got 3 guys now pulling their name out saying, you know what, actually, we got no interest, right? And they're going to be in a spot where it's like, nobody even wants your job, which it's not an intriguing job at all, but like you should want that job over the Cardinal job. But like some of these people are like, you know what, I'm good, actually. We're good. We're not going to go up to miserable Cleveland and live through all that and play in a division with Burrow and Jackson and just keep going with this clown show of an operation. We're good. And it's just funny because it's just adding to the mess of the Cleveland Browns is this whole head coaching search. It seems like they have no clue. Maybe they can get Shieldhouse, the Rams guy, to take it. Apparently they're in LA today trying to figure that out. But if he's like, you know what, I'm good, they're in a world of trouble. And then they're going to end up promoting Jim Schwartz. And again, Stefanski, Harbaugh, Tomlin out. Insert Minter, McCarthy, and Jim Schwartz. Great defensive coach, but we saw how that worked as a head coach, not well. So I think really how this has gone for Cincinnati this offseason, you couldn't ask really for a heck of a lot more here at this point. But appreciate everybody hanging out with us here on a Monday. Some great viewership here for our at-home show. We didn't go into the studio today. No off the bench today. Reed Mouse, will talk with him. Plan is to be back tomorrow. We'll see. I got a couple of more guests coming up this week, so really looking forward to that. But obviously I had to hop on here and talk about these playoff games, these championship games, and how things are evolving in the AFC North. Because I think the offseason to this point, obviously we haven't dove into the draft and free agency yet, but I don't think this is really couldn't really be going better for the Cincinnati Bengals here at this point with some of the hirings that have been made in the AFC North and just the mess that is the Cleveland Browns. So appreciate everyone as always. Appreciate my right-hand man, Casey McAllister, for overseeing this from his house. And everyone have a great rest of your Monday. Hopefully we're back in studio tomorrow with the show. And I got lots of exciting stuff certainly coming up here. But if you missed any parts of the show, it's fine. We'll still have a podcast up later this afternoon. Make sure you check that out. And of course, any clips on social media, YouTube, follow me at StoneShields _ follow the show at the Stone Shields, follow Chatterbox as well at Cbox Sports there as well. But everybody in the chat, appreciate you. Spirit Cat, Tasden, Cincy B, who we got here, Everett Henry, all popping in here, which I appreciate your guys' support as well, even on a little at-home show here from home. So appreciate everyone as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.